Hi there, this is your moderator, Lori Dearman with WebAttract, your end-to-end solution provider for webinar demand creation. And you are in the right place for top technology and research trends to watch, new ideas for improving discovery and commercialization. In just a moment, I'll be introducing our panel of thought leaders, as today's webinar is about hearing from these experts as they discuss the importance of innovative materials, technologies, and applications in unlocking market potential while addressing customer expectations, regulatory changes, scalability for manufacturing, and profitability goals. Now, today we do have a diverse audience of over 300 professionals representing 34 countries, 31 states and provinces across a variety of industries, all here to learn about key technology and research trends that will impact companies in the chemicals and advanced materials space in the coming years, effective ways to help scientists and engineers tap into cutting-edge academic research and emerging technology developments while working within the realities of a commercial setting, as well as ideas on how to facilitate innovation using examples of products that have been successfully commercialized. Regardless of your industry segment or your location today, we're confident that you'll find the webinar of value. Coming up on your screen, we would like to know from each of you, where do you get the majority of your information on the latest developments in advanced materials? And go ahead and select your top two. This is on the honors system, so we're just going to ask you to give us your top two. All right, I'm showing 53% saying journals, 43 conferences, 25% saying colleagues, 28 patent databases, and our front runner here, 59%, saying industry news websites. So there you have it. It's a good opportunity to see what other people are doing as well. Now, the host of today's webinar is Elsevier, and before we get started, I would like to turn it over to Regina Javier, Solutions Marketing Director, Elsevier R&D Solutions. So over to you, Regina, to give us a quick welcome and express what you hope folks will get out of today. Regina?
Yes, thanks for the introduction, Lori, and welcome everyone. I should say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I am personally excited that Elsevier is hosting today's webinar. And for those of you who are new to us, let me just introduce ourselves in a minute. We are a digital information business, and really our mission, our passion is to lead the way in advancing science, technology, and health through empowering knowledge. So specifically, our Elsevier R&D Solutions portfolio helps companies improve and accelerate R&D decisions and outcomes. Some of you are our users already. Our users include scientists, researchers, engineers, and other technical experts such as yourselves at top chemical, engineering, aerospace, and other companies around the world. And I guess I can put it in a nutshell, quite simply, we help customers discover and bring new products, processes, and applications to market. And we do this by providing content and technology assets that really support having an integrated system of data and tools designed to help users in their daily work. So that's us. And today's webinar focuses on the very timely topic of advanced materials. I see there's over 300 of you on the registration list, and I'm very excited to have you all. As many of you know, many innovations that impact our lives today hinge upon the discovery and commercialization of new materials with superior characteristics and functionality. So this makes for an innovation-intensive market. And based on what we are hearing from our customers, this means that organizations must find a way to essentially continually recognize and act upon these key trends and developments in the market, because doing so helps accelerate an emerging idea into your next profitable commercial success or even a life-changing solution to a customer. So keeping this in mind, let me say welcome again, and we hope you all can walk away from today's session with some really useful insights that you can use for your work. Welcome again, and thanks for joining us. Back to you, Lori.
Well, thank you, Regina, for the warm welcome and for setting the stage for our featured panel, which is comprised of two real thought leaders in this space. Joining us today, we have Dr. Roger Narayan and Dr. Stuart Bland, and I'll be introducing each of them as they appear in today's program. So speaking first, we have Dr. Stuart Bland, a senior publisher at Elsevier. Stuart obtained his PhD in materials physics at the University of Durham, UK. And Stuart is editor-in-chief of the Materials Today journal and website, and publisher of several industry magazines and peer-reviewed scientific journals. So a warm welcome to you, Stuart. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, all the way from the UK.
Thanks, Laurie. It's good to be here.
And now, folks, today Dr. Bland will be giving us a publisher's perspective on trends and what to keep an eye on and how you can better tap into what's going on in the industry. So with that, over to you, Stuart.
Great. Well, thank you for that introduction, Laurie, and thanks also to the R&D Solutions team for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all today. As Laurie mentioned there, I've got a bit of a mixed role at Elsevier in that I'm not just editorially responsible for one of our reviews journals, which is dedicated to reviews of the hottest topics in material science, but I also look after some journals in a publishing capacity, but also some of our industry B2B magazines as well. So hopefully I can give you a bit of an overview of where academia meets industry, and I'll of course be doing that from a publishing perspective given my particular background. So just jumping on straight to this first slide. So I see from the poll and some of the data that Laurie showed at the start that we have a very diverse audience here, and I'm sure looking at those polls that most of you are aware that journals are one of the key ways that researchers use to communicate what they're working on with other researchers and the world at large. One of my key takeaways really for this part of the presentation is that that journals really give you an insight into what's going on in science and ultimately what will be going on in industry, and hopefully I can convince the 50% of people who didn't tick the journals box on the poll that publications really are a window into what's going on. But just to give you a bit of an overview of the field in general and how it's developing in terms of size. On the screen at the moment, on the right-hand side, we've got a graph derived from Scopus data, which is Elsevier's abstract and indexing service of journals and books. And if you do a very basic search to see just how much content has been published over the last 15 years, you can see a very strong growth there of articles being published in material science journals, and a really strong growth of 140% over the last 10 years alone. When we take a look at where those articles are coming from, and now on the left-hand side there, we've got a breakdown of which represents the 5 countries that are producing the most material science articles as of 2014, and those numbers, particularly on the right-hand side there, are for 2014. You can see that the growth, this 140% growth, is really to a large extent driven by China and India, and that's perhaps no surprise given they are two of the fastest growing global economies. But you see more traditional markets like the US there and Germany there, still no slouches, and still really strong growth of 100% and 110%, 112% and 76%. So I guess my second take-home message already on the second slide is that material science really is a very quickly and strongly growing area of science and technology. When we take a look at these publications, and now I'm using a tool called SciVal, which is also an Elsevier tool that lets you dig into publication metrics and try to identify some of these trends. If we look at what terms are being used, what keywords and titles and words in abstracts are being used in these journals, we see that the field, to a large extent, is driven by the more traditional materials chemistry terms, and right there, straight in the center, you can see hydrogen bonds and rings and dihedral angles and all the more traditional terms. But creeping in red to show you that they are really growing, you start to see these more advanced materials terms now. So you can see graphene right there, which I've no doubt I will mention several or many more times in today's webinar, as well as nanoparticles, nanowires, solar cells, applications there on the left, which again is going to be another one of my key takeaways. Lithium for lithium-ion batteries, carbon nanotubes. So these advanced materials are starting now to creep further into the center as we move forward. That's one way to look at publication trends, but perhaps a more interesting way is to look at not what's being published in all of the material science journals, but to take a subset of the most highly cited. So again, I noticed that, or I'm aware that many of you listening today are from a research background, but for those who aren't, just to explain what I'm talking about when I mention things like impact factor, I'm talking about the average number of citations that a journal is getting to other journals, from other journals, pardon. And this is one way you can assess how exciting or how interested other materials researchers are in those topics. So if we take the top 10 journals with the highest impact factor and look at what they've been publishing over the last 4 years and try and match which terms within those papers are associated to papers that are generating lots of citations, we can generate a heat map that looks kind of like the thing that you've got on screen at the moment. Now, we've only got a limited amount of time today, so I've greatly simplified what we're seeing on the screen and have removed the majority of the words from the heat map and just left on a few that I feel are a little bit representative. So you'll just have to trust me to some extent on what's going on the full heat map. Perhaps we can come on to that in the Q&A. But essentially, what we see is that the heat map breaks down into 3 key areas. And what we find is that whole top left of the heat map is devoted to materials for energy, and that's represented in this case by terms like battery and capacity and performance. In the bottom left, the really hot area there, glowing red, we have these materials related to more around advanced electronics, really. So again, we've got graphene there. Again, I said it would come up. Superconductivity, and then more novel things like spintronics. And then over on the right-hand side, the entire right-hand side, we've got this whole biomaterials area and biomedical area. So again, cell and tissue and imaging creeping in there. So these are the 3 areas that I'm going to speak about more towards the end of the presentation. But again, these are my third takeaway, I guess, is that these are the 3 really exciting topics, 3 areas rather, going on in material science at the moment, and that they're very, very application focused. So that's advanced materials for electronics, for energy, and for biomaterial and biomedical applications. So how else can we take a look at what's going on? So you can do things like looking at what's been most cited within a particular year, not restricting it to a subset of the journals as we were in this case. In the last case, we're just looking at over every single journal what really has been the most cited. And this is interesting, but it can be a little bit misleading. So what we see in this case, we have a top 10 that is almost entirely dominated by perovskite solar cells, due largely to the large and rapid increases in efficiency that they've recently experienced. And that's not to say that perovskite solar cells aren't a very important topic and very high impact topic, but it isn't representative of the entire field of material science. But it gives you a really interesting window into what's going on at any individual time. But if you want to really start looking at trends, I think a better thing to do, or a more useful thing to do perhaps, is to take a look at what's going on over a longer period of time. So if we move on to the next slide, we get a slide that looks at what's been most cited over the last 10 years. And here we start to see a number of papers coming in related to graphene synthesis. So graphene is a material that has some very promising applications in electronics and composites mainly. But we also see some papers creeping in there for supercapacitors, so this relates to both energy and advanced electronics, and also some papers relating to solar cells there. So again, around those 2 key areas of advanced electronics and energy, but again, highly applied. A third way we can start looking at things is to not look at what's been cited, but to look at what's actually being downloaded. So in this case, it's restricted to papers from Elsevier because it's a bit tricky to get that data from everywhere. And I've got the data here for the top 10 most downloaded articles in material science in 2014. What's really interesting about this graph, and this is something that I look at this kind of data quite often, and you rarely see the top item of this slide is the same as the top item of the last slide. So it really does help suggest that this is synthesis of graphene is really something to keep an eye on. But if we take a look at the top 10 in this case, again, we see papers related to graphene synthesis, a couple of papers on energy. We've got lithium-ion batteries there. And also got some papers on advanced composites creeping in. And although my three take-home materials topics to watch for today are energy materials, biomaterials, and advanced electronics, I think composites are my honorary mention and my first runner-up. So good to see them creeping in on this list. So the large topic of today is about commercialization and industry. So if we take a look at how many papers are coming from industry and the growth, or rather the growth of papers from industry, if we just do a very crude search to see what affiliations the authors have and whether they're coming from corporate or limited or incorporate affiliations, we can see still here a very strong growth of nearly 100% over the last 10 years, and that's really great to see, considering that there's far less motivation for researchers from coming from industry to publish than there is from researchers in academia. Obviously, it's not always beneficial to let your competitors know exactly what you're working on, but it's really good to see this, and it's due in part because of the increased collaboration between industry and academia, and this line is becoming increasingly blurry. And this overlap really is something else that's growing quite a lot. When we take a look at the companies that are responsible for many of these publications, it's no surprise to see the advanced electronics companies right up at the top there. But again, you start seeing the automotive and aerospace companies coming in again there with that other topic I mentioned, advanced composites. So yeah, really good to help make this point that I'm trying to stress of these core materials. It's no surprise to some extent that we see such a large amount of publications coming from industry, given the very large amount of funding that actually does come from the private sector for research and development. And a figure at the bottom, although from 2010, still good to see that around about 70% of the funding in the US coming from the private sector. But of course, much of it is, of course, coming from the public sector. I think we're seeing some really interesting trends towards applications coming from funding as well. And you do have this link between funding, research, and publications that are in this cycle. So I think it's also worth just mentioning quickly a little bit about some of the changes we've seen in some of the major funding projects, which have moved a little bit away from the distribution of money for basic research, and at least the two projects or the two funding initiatives that I'm going to mention today, one from Europe and one from the US, that are very explicitly application focused, which is something that's a little bit different, a little bit new. So just to quickly mention the Graphene Flagship, which is the EU's biggest ever research initiative, and it's an EU-wide project that has a funding of €1 billion over 10 years, and it's very explicitly about bringing together academics and industry to take a particular material, in this case graphene again, from the academic environment into the commercial environment, and that's something quite different to funding calls we've seen in the past, and this one is quite explicit about what it's trying to achieve, and it's really great to see that it has that link into societal benefits. Over on the other side, on the US, something a bit similar but geared slightly differently is the Materials Genome Initiative. And again, this is not so much about focusing on a particular material and moving that from the lab into the commercial sector, but more about speeding up the process with which materials development occurs. So it often takes decades to move from the lab into the commercial sector, and this project, the Materials Genome Initiative, is all about speeding up that process through encouraging collaboration between academic and industry, but also about getting researchers to work in a slightly different way, and about how data is used and sharing data for materials discovery to really accelerate that process. Just to hammer that point home, there's a quote there from President Obama about how the invention of silicon circuits and lithium-ion batteries made computers and iPods and iPads possible, but it took years to get those technologies from the drawing board to the marketplace. We can do it faster. So yeah, really positive message there, and I think really hammers home how something such as silicon chips and lithium-ion batteries were once in the academic domain, but it took a long time to get them into the commercial area. But now they are absolutely everywhere, and I'm sure there's no one watching today's webinar that doesn't have a device in their pocket that contains both of those two components. So just going quickly over my what to watch materials, and I think I've mentioned them several times now. They are energy, biomaterials, and electronics. So within energy, we've got things around the next generation of lithium-based batteries. So creating batteries that are able to not only charge faster but have a much higher energy density. Also materials around hydrogen storage. So hydrogen is of course a very clean burning fuel, but how do you store enough of it in a safe way is a kind of tricky area. So things such as metal organic frameworks and other porous materials are being looked at to provide a route to storing hydrogen. And also, of course, photovoltaics, so solar energy is, of course, a major area. And again, we mentioned that several times already today. Over on electronics, again, I've gone on about graphene again and again, which is, of course, a two-dimensional material, but there are other two- and low-dimensional materials out there that are also proving to be very interesting. So molybdenum sulfide, of course, looking very interesting, as it is, of course, a semiconductor, but also, carbon nanotubes are looking interesting. They have, of course, been around since the 90s, when they really sparked off everyone's interest in nanotech, but still very interesting, and now really looking towards some really interesting commercial developments. Organic electronics as well. So this is polymer-based electronics, so electronics that are flexible and can be printed, and very different to the hard electronic materials we're of course used to. And then more novel electronic materials such as spintronics, so looking at controlling logic through the electron's magnetic moment as well as just the charge, and of course plasmonics, so doing some interesting things with photons, with optics at below the diffraction limit using nanomaterials. And then, of course, biomaterials again. So things such as regenerative medicine, so scaffolds and the use of hydrogels for various applications. Drug delivery, again, either using nanoparticles or other materials to hold drugs. And, of course, also things like gene delivery and the delivery at the bottom there of imaging agents. So development of technologies that not only benefit researchers, but also people working in the clinic to look at what's going on really with their patients. So just tapping into what's going on, I think I'm looking at the first slide that Laurie showed and maybe preaching a little bit to the converted, but I think journals really are one way to really look at what's going on. And if you don't have time to go through every journal, I think keeping an eye on what journals publishers are launching is also a good way to see which technologies are emerging. So just a few of the recent journals that have been launched by Elsevier's journals team. So Applied Materials Day very much getting a large proportion of papers coming through on low-dimensional materials, energy storage materials there, the focus there being on lithium-ion batteries and hydrogen storage, that kind of thing, and of course additive manufacturing. So I didn't mention that today, but things around the idea of 3D printing. And then, of course, things such as industry websites. So I don't want this to turn into a plug for Materials Today, of course, but websites like Materials Today have a very clear remit of trying to connect different communities, not just from science, but from industry as well. So, would encourage everyone to take a look at that, of course. And then, of course, conferences and exhibitions, which have been around for forever, of course, but we are seeing, new conferences now come along, and traditional academic conferences taking a different flavour, as they do have a larger industry presence. So worth taking a look at how things are moving by attending some of these events. So I'm running a bit short of time now, so I'll just give you my key takeaways now. And that's really that the publications do provide a window into what's going on within research, and material science in particular is an incredibly fast and rapidly growing area. Within material science, applications are a very strong focus, and we've seen those three core areas there of advanced electronics, biomaterials, and energy, and that these do in a very real way, such as those silicon chips and lithium-ion batteries, provide an insight into what's going to be big in key future technologies. And so at the risk of running over, I'll now hand you back over to Laurie.
All right, thank you so much, Stuart, and don't go too far. We'll have you back at the end of the program for the Q&A. At this point, I would like to bring on our second speaker, Dr. Roger Narayan, professor in the Joint Department of Biomedical Engineering at the University of North Carolina and North Carolina State University. He is an author of over 100 publications, as well as several book chapters on processing and characterization of biomedical materials. And he currently serves as an editorial board member for several academic journals, including as editor-in-chief of Materials Science and Engineering C, Materials for Biological Applications, Elsevier, which is a leading journal in the biomaterials field. Dr. Narayan has received several honors for his research activities, including the National Science Faculty Early Career Development Award, the Office of Naval Research Young Investigator Award, and the American Ceramic Society Richard M. Fulrath Award. He's been elected as Fellow of AAAS, ASM, International, and AIMBE. At this point, I would like to welcome you, Roger, to the webinar. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
It's great to join all of you in the audience, and what I'll do during this afternoon or this morning's discussion is to go over some of the findings from ASM International's Emerging Technologies Awareness Committee's survey on emerging materials technologies, and then go into a little bit of depth about one of these findings, in particular the use of additive manufacturing to try to develop new products and create some new commercial opportunities.
Fantastic. And I know in just a few minutes you're going to get to that. I'm wondering first if you'd give us a quick introduction of ASM and your role within the organization.
Sure. So ASM International is one of the largest material societies in the world. It has over 30,000 materials engineers, educators, and other materials professionals. In addition, it has over 80 professional chapters worldwide, which serve as extensions of ASM International into local communities. It also has affiliate societies in heat treating, thermal spray, shape memory, and superelastic technologies and metallography. It also conducts a large number of symposia throughout the year and expos throughout the year. And the most prominent one is the Materials Science and Technology Annual Meeting. It also conducts conferences on heat treating, thermal spray, and aerospace materials. ASM also does a wide variety of continuing education activities, including on-site training, online courses, and DVD courses. My role within ASM International in recent years has been involved with the Emerging Technologies Awareness Committee. The Emerging Technologies Awareness Committee is a group of about 15 to 20 researchers in industry, academia, and government laboratories, and we alert the Board of Trustees, the New Products and Services Committee, and the Technical Programming Committees about emerging technologies and global trends in material science. One of the things that's one of the most prominent activities of the Emerging Technologies Awareness Committee has been to conduct surveys, and these surveys allow ASM to develop new products and services and develop new programming. Manish Mehta, who is Director of Strategic Projects and Sustainability at the National Center for Manufacturing Sciences, and other colleagues on the Emerging Technologies Awareness Committee recently conducted a survey of several hundred ASM members to try to understand what technologies will have the most significant impact on future of material science and engineering. In particular, the survey asked, what are 3 materials-related technologies and 3 process-related technologies that are expected to have significant impact over the next few years? And as you can see on this slide, there are really a wide variety of topics that the surveyors mentioned. These topics touch on fields such as aerospace, defense, energy, environment, healthcare, natural resources, consumer devices, and transportation. The highest category on the list, the one that had the largest number of responses, was high performance materials, including materials which have light weight, high strength, and can perform at high temperatures. And this is the basis of many for transportation technologies, such as aerospace and motor vehicle technologies. In addition, there's been a lot of response to energy materials, materials for fuel cells, batteries, solar photovoltaics, and the like. Respondents also mentioned additive manufacturing or 3D printing, the idea of layer by layer additive growth of materials in order to create a three-dimensional product. And I will talk a little bit more about that later in my presentation. Another topic that came up quite a bit was integrated computational materials engineering, or ICME, which is the idea of doing modeling and simulation to generate more efficient materials and processing approaches. You can also see other respondents mentioned biomedical materials, smart materials, materials for environmental applications, surface coatings, and metal processing technologies. In terms of what we see as the most impactful technologies to come, the natural next question is, how does this get implemented within industry? Part of this challenge with new materials is the evolution from discovery to commercialization. At this point, I'd like to pivot and talk about some examples and ideas on how to bring advanced materials and applications to commercial success. One of the things you can see on this slide, which was prepared by Venkat Rajan and his colleagues at Frost & Sullivan, is that the medical device space, which I'm most familiar with, based on my experience in the biomedical field, is a very large and growing area. And as you can see here, topics such as minimally invasive devices that improve well-being and quality of life can play a major role. Companies that create easier treatments and use advanced materials to generate new solutions can not only provide greater clinical outcomes, better clinical outcomes for their patients, but can also realize higher revenues and more successful business outcomes. And one of the technologies that Frost & Sullivan highlighted was the use of 3D printing, because 3D printing offers an approach for testing, development, and customization of medical devices that is much more efficient than conventional mechanisms. Additive manufacturing, otherwise known as 3D printing, layer manufacturing, rapid prototyping, or solid freeform fabrication, is an approach that involves additive manufacturing of or additive building of three-dimensional materials or multi-component systems in a layer-by-layer manner. Some of the earliest patents involving additive manufacturing were developed and published about 30 years ago. So it's one of these things where it's a rapidly evolving field, but it's also a field that has quite a big history. And one of the things we see about the history of additive manufacturing, it comes from universities, including University of Texas at Austin. So one of the technologies, selective laser sintering, was developed by Joseph Beeman and his colleagues. Another example of a technology that was based out of the university includes the technology known as 3D printing, which came from Emanuel Sachs and his colleagues at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In addition, we see a lot of commercial translation of these sorts of technologies. So a lot of the technology that came from university eventually made its way into the industrial applications and into prominent commercial devices and commercially available products. In terms of the sorts of aspects of additive manufacturing, I certainly can't give a large discussion of it during this presentation. I'll just give you a little bit more details. It's essentially a way in which you can create materials, three-dimensional materials, through joining together of powders, filaments, or liquid precursors in order to create three-dimensional structures in a layer-by-layer manner. And we're seeing applications of this for both structural applications, including aerospace, and functional applications, including electronic devices. The advantages for this is that you're able to create structures for a large number of technologies, as you can see here. The most prominent industry that uses this is motor vehicles, but also consumer products, medical devices, and the aerospace industry use additive manufacturing quite a bit in terms of trying to improve their processes and get products to market. In addition, the graph on the right shows that the use of 3D printing is a global phenomenon. So although the United States is a major player in this technology, you see that it is also a technology that's being used quite a bit in Europe, Asia, and in other parts of the globe. The advantages of 3D printing are multifold. They allow one to create parts which are very complex, which are very hard to make through conventional techniques such as casting, forging, or subtractive manufacturing. You can create parts that have complex features, but also very high strength and lightweight. You can create parts that are customized, so they are directly created from a computer model, and you are able to do this at a very low cost and very quickly as compared to conventional techniques. In addition, you don't have to deal with tooling, and tooling is very much labor specific and very time consuming. So if you can avoid tooling, you can get parts very quickly from a computer model and do so in a way that really accelerates your product development timelines. In terms of the use of 3D printing for medical applications, we see a lot of things in academia. So there are a lot of technologies that are being developed at universities and at other research facilities throughout the globe. But we also are seeing a lot of this bleeding into the commercial space. So the most prominent use of additive manufacturing in the commercial environment, in the environment all around us, is in the dental space of things such as clear aligners, including Invisalign, but also dental models and surgical guides. And what we see is that this is a way to create patient-specific alignment of the teeth in a way that is nearly impossible to do through conventional subtractive means. We think that this technique will only grow over time. Right now, if you know about Invisalign, the part that people put in their mouths is not created through 3D printing. There's a mold that's created through a 3D printing technique known as stereolithography, which is a light-based 3D printing technique. But the final aligner is made based on this 3D printed part. So over time, we anticipate that you'll have direct production of things that go in the mouth and potentially can last a long time in the mouth through 3D printing. So you don't necessarily have to create these kind of molds as intermediary steps, and that will only accelerate the use of 3D printing in the commercial space. But also there are examples where in the literature where and all around us where techniques additive manufacturing techniques are being used to create prostheses and also implants. And so this is something that will only grow over time. One example of work from my lab related to printing for medical applications involves use of piezoelectric inkjet printing. Inkjet printing, very similar to what you see in your Epson printer at your local office supply store, to print drugs that have poor solubility in water. So there are a lot of drugs for treatment of various sorts of infections and cancer, and also even vaccines that are very difficult to deliver through conventional means, such as patches or through oral formulations. And so at this current time, they're delivered through large needles, hypodermic syringes. What we've looked at is to create small-scale needles called microneedles. And these devices can be used to deliver drugs directly through the skin. And the way that we have applied these poorly water-soluble agents to the microneedles is through piezoelectric inkjet printing. So we basically will take the microneedle and we'll apply the drug directly onto the needle, and then we can then apply this device onto the skin. And this removes the complication of getting a poorly water-soluble agent in the body, and it also avoids use of very expensive alternative approaches such as nano formulations, liposomes, and other techniques. And so what we see is that you can use piezoelectric inkjet printing very successfully to put controlled amounts of drugs onto these devices, and that these devices are effective. And we're right now working with industry to try to commercialize this and take this into use for treatment of a variety of infections, including parasitic infections and fungal infections, but also it has use for treatment of chronic diseases. So the key takeaways from our discussion are that collaborations between academia and industry in the field of 3D printing have led to very successful innovations and clinical benefits. A lot of the 3D printing things and products, instruments, and approaches that we see all around us originated at universities. And only through that collaboration between university and industry will we get advanced innovations and things that not only will provide better outcomes in terms of commercial products for clinical care, but also, as we saw in one of the earlier slides, increase revenues. So the things that will drive a business and allow it to stay competitive with its peers. One of the other keys is that you can use advanced technologies to make products stand out from the competition. And sometimes to do this, you have to look in allied areas. So you might not necessarily be able to find all of the advances for your own product within your specific field. And so being able to survey related fields, allied fields, look at the silos around you will allow you to more successfully understand what emerging developments can be applied to your techniques, your products, and make them more competitive, more functional, more usable, and generate higher profits in the end. Finally, science and technology is becoming more interconnected across specialties. And so being able to become adept at thinking across disciplines, understanding the technologies that are being developed in these allied disciplines is critical. And so having access to the literature, having access to the information that's constantly being generated is of critical importance. This concludes my segment. Back to you, Lori.
Well, thank you so much, Roger. And again, we'll have you back for the Q&A. But before we do that, just a few words on how you can continue the discussion. If you'd like to keep in touch around this topic, we invite you to check out our Facebook page, so facebook.com/novel. You can like the fan page and comment on posts about this webinar as well. You can find us on Twitter, twitter.com/novel updates. And then a few websites here to learn more about Elsevier. Well, I'm going to go to our first question in the queue in the meantime, and going to direct this one at you, Stuart. Stuart, the question is, I noticed that you didn't include a category for nanotechnology in your slides. Why is that?
Yes, I thought this might come up. Yeah, why have I focused on energy, biomaterials and electronics and not really mentioned nano as its own category? So I think I'm preaching to the, speaking to the converted in this, but in case anyone doesn't know, nanotech tends to refer to materials that have one or more components that has a dimension between 1 and 100 nanometers, and those things are a little bit blurry. Sometimes two-dimensional materials are referred to as nanomaterials as well, and sometimes that upper length scale is expanded. But the reason I really didn't include this as a separate category is when you start looking at publications and looking at the use of terms like nanotechnology, you start to see that they're almost everywhere now. There's almost nothing, or at least almost 50% of what's being published in material science will in some way relate to some component that has something on the nanoscale. So from my perspective, I don't think it's always useful to define nano as this tiny niche thing. It really is, so dominant in material science now that that material science and nanoscience are almost indistinguishable to some extent. So yeah, that's why I've not included it as a separate category.
All right, thank you. And going over to you, Roger. Roger, I have a question from Chris. In regards to 3D printing, one of the big problems I'm having is finding mechanical property data on more commonly used ferrous materials like low and medium carbon steels. All I found are non-ferrous or pH hardened steels. Can I find this somewhere?
I think that's actually a very good question. I think trying to find this information on these materials is a big challenge, and one that a variety of different organizations have attacked over time. So ASM International actually is a very well-known publisher of handbooks and databases. So they've collaborated with an outside vendor to develop these databases that cover a kind of a wide variety of materials that serve as inputs to additive manufacturing or subtractive manufacturing techniques. That is one resource. I think another thing that is also a potential resource, and also in many cases could be a superior one, are many of the Elsevier products. So if you look at the large body of work that Elsevier publishes on material science and specifically various metal processing approaches, in many cases through examination of those research papers, you can find some of the recent updates and findings on some of these newer feedstock materials for various additive or subtractive processing approaches. So I think it's twofold. You can look at these organized databases, which can be very comprehensive, but sometimes don't have all of the data, or one has to basically go through some of the source journals to find this information. And as Elsevier is one of the largest publishers in the materials literature, oftentimes just going directly to the source and finding the recent findings from people in the community who have worked on identical or similar materials can be of help. So I think it is challenging, but if you use both of those approaches, you'll have as much information as exists has been gathered by the community.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Stuart. Anshuman is asking, are there discussion forums that we can participate in regards to upcoming technologies?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of resources that I'll suggest. One of them, of course, has to be materialsday.com, where we were always constantly encouraging people to comment and interact on the content on there, and encourage a discussion of the articles that are being published. So that's one way to look, one place to look. The other is that I'll mention is Mendeley, which you traditionally might know that as a citation platform for logging papers. But if you join the groups, there is the functionality there to get involved more in a discussion. So I think, yeah, materialsday.com and Mendeley would be the two that I would look to start discussions in real time.
Okay, well, I have you, Stuart. Another one from you. Mariah is asking, in the hot topics section, there was nothing specific mentioned about polymers. Do you think that this is an area that will have a lot of development opportunities in the future?
Yes. So I guess really in the topics that I focused on were the ones that are growing quite rapidly, whereas polymers is, of course, a very large and well-established area. But that's not to say there aren't lots of interesting things going on there. So just by the sheer size of the polymer industry, I think there are lots of opportunities. But within that, there are some really interesting things going on. So things around, again, on the bio side, the biopolymers, very interesting. But also, I did mention a little bit about the composites, and the advanced composite materials, I think, are where there are going to be some interesting opportunities. But yeah, polymers, of course, is a massive and very important area where there will always be stuff going on.
All right, and this one for you, Roger. The question is, can you give some other examples of technologies that originated in academia that translated into industry?
Sure, I think there are quite a few examples from the biomedical materials space. So up until basically the 80s or the 90s, almost all of the biomedical materials originally were developed for other applications. So one of the most common metal alloys that's used throughout dental and other medical implants is titanium, aluminum, vanadium alloy, Ti 6% aluminum, 4% vanadium alloy, and that was originally really an aerospace alloy. It was really developed in order to create better, more efficient airframes, and then it was transferred into the biomedical material space, and now it is the basis for all variety of orthopedic and dental implants. Another example is polymethyl methacrylate, and there's a really interesting story about how that transferred into the medical space. There was a medical pioneer in biomedical polymers named Harold Ridley, who noticed that polymethyl methacrylate that was in cockpit frames and cockpit material went into the flight personnel's their eyes during missions in World War II, and they did not cause inflammation. And based on that, he basically transferred polymethyl methacrylate from a material that was used as a cockpit material in World War II planes and made it into a material was the basis for many of the original ophthalmic devices, so intraocular lenses, contact lenses. Now, of course, we've moved into more sophisticated polymers for a lot of these applications, including hydrogels and other classes of polymers. But in fact, a lot of the materials that form the basis of the medical devices that surround us come from other industries.
All right, and Roger, I've got one more for you. What other specific 3D printing technologies can you apply to industry?
Sure. So we do a lot of 3D printing beyond piezoelectric inkjet printing. So we've been involved through the years in techniques such as matrix-assisted pulse laser evaporation direct write, or laser direct writing, which has applications for printing of cells for diagnostics and other clinically relevant assays. We also have been working on a digital micro mirror device-based stereolithography, and we've used this technology, this light-based additive manufacturing technology, to create the housing for many of our transdermal sensors. We use microneedles and integrate them with all sorts of electrochemical sensors, and including carbon fiber and porous carbon-based sensors. And we've found that these sorts of products have a lot of potential commercial use, and especially with these wearable devices, have a lot for health monitoring, have wide potential applications. And we've also looked at two-photon polymerization, which is an additive manufacturing technique based on two-photon absorption, and allows you to do 3D printing additive manufacturing under a micrometer in terms of feature size. And so we've looked at that approach for making all manner of medical products. So we've looked at beyond piezoelectric inkjet printing, which we think has a tremendous role in terms of processing diagnostics and pharmacologic agents. We think that these light-based additive manufacturing techniques, either laser-based cell printing or laser-based photopolymerization at kind of a micrometer scale or even sub-micrometer scale, have a lot of potential for devices. And we've worked with all manner of medical device companies, including medium-sized ones and large companies that many of you have heard of, in order to create products that not only can be used as final products, but then also tooling in the line, because especially if you can make these through additive manufacturing, through a computer model, make these components with fine scale features, that as tooling or as a mold for making hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of final products with very intricate features becomes a real game changer for a lot of different industries. but we've worked mostly with medical, but we certainly have worked with other industries, allied industries in the past as well.
All right. Well, folks, that's all the questions we have time for, but I did want to ask each of our speakers to leave us with any final thoughts. We'll start with you, Roger.
Well, yeah, I think that my points during this discussion were really to raise the idea that there are innovations in a wide variety of areas in material science. So as you can see from that ETAC survey, it really spans industries that many of you are involved with, and basically advances in material science will transform many of your general fields, but also many of the specific products that you manufacture. So being abreast of current developments is of key importance. And then an additive manufacturing for medical applications, as I went over later in my discussion, I think that that's kind of a key area in terms of materials developments, but you can see how a lot of these technologies that simply didn't exist a few decades ago are really now allowing for innovation in new products, not only revolutionary changes, so creation of new products that didn't exist before, but also evolutionary changes, being able to make really quite significant improvements to existing product lines. And so the ability to take any one of these new technologies and basically kind of drive that can allow, I think, for tremendous benefits to many of the industries that you're involved with. And I think being abreast of the materials literature is one way to make sure that one doesn't fall behind with one's peers, and also can really take advantage of new technologies in order to drive things forward.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And from you, Stuart?
Yeah, I mean, just to echo Roger's last point there, I guess my take-home message was similar, that, publications can really give you an insight into what's not only going on, but what will be big in the future, not just by looking at individual journal articles, but looking at the trends in general. And also that this application focus is something that is growing rapidly, it is growing rapidly, and it's of interest to people from both sides. So industry being very keen to interact more with researchers and researchers with industry. So if you are looking to make some of those collaborations, I would say, don't be shy. People are willing to get involved, and also just on a totally different tangent, just to thank everyone for listening, and to the organizers as well for giving me the opportunity.
Well, thank you. And before we sign off, I'd like to thank each of you as well for joining us. Trust that you found today to be of value. And of course, special thanks to Roger and Stuart and our sponsors, Elsevier. Special thanks to our logistics producer, Terry Holland, for her behind-the-scenes collaboration and support. So again, thank you for joining. As your moderator, this is Lori Dearman saying have a great rest of the week. Bye for now.